Welcome to episode 197 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. This is the What We Want to See in the Winter Sky Before It's Gone episode. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up the night sky, and this podcast is anyone else who likes going out under the stars. So, as it gets dark, Shane, we've got some new moon periods, some period here coming up over the next couple of weeks when the moon is going to be out of the sky. And at the end of February, Capella and Auriga are passing through the zenith, while the rest of the winter circle constellations are approaching the meridian. We call this the Orion Hour. So with these lighter evenings, we are getting towards the end of winter and have a little while yet to maybe take a look at what's in the winter sky. Are you excited for this?
Well, yes, but cautiously excited because our weather just hasn't been good. So I'm hoping that we are able to get out here, because the other positive about this time of the year for us is the temperatures warm up a little bit and observing is more comfortable. And typically our springs actually aren't too bad. Like there's been a lot of times where you and I and Mike were observing in February. And you know, it's quite warm sometimes, like right around freezing, where we're wearing lighter jackets and it's just, you know, far more enjoyable than you know, what it can be during the wintertime here.
Yeah. So, what are you looking forward to seeing now that we're getting, you know, some hopefully warmer evenings? You know, it's been like into the minus 40s and now it's into the minus 4s, which is awesome. And, what are you kind of hoping to see for the winter sky that we really haven't been able to get out and enjoy much of so far this winter?
Well, there's two lists or projects that I'm slowly ticking away on. One of them is the RASC double star observing list, and there's a few doubles there that I would like to get in before spring comes. Larry talked about a couple that we mentioned on the previous podcast or the previous episode, and Struve 162 and Struve 390. You know, those are interesting. So definitely some double star observing. And then the other one that I'm working on is Stephen James O'Meara Hidden Treasures list. I think there's 109 objects on that list, spanning all seasons, and there's some open clusters in Monoceros that I would like to see, and there's some stuff up in Eridanus too. A couple of galaxies I wouldn't mind trying for that are on that list. So yeah, there's certainly no shortage. And then, you know, there's some of the kind of the showpiece items like M42. You know, I can never look at that one enough, especially under darker skies. Another double star is Sirius B. You know, I'd really like to see that companion as well this year. How about yourself?
Yeah, I got you know, fairly extensive list. I was, you know, Dave, who's one of our listeners, had recently made the suggestion about counting the stars in M45, and you know, it'd be great to get some listener emails. Put our email address at the end of this, but it'd be great to get some listener emails on how many stars people can see in M45, Messier 45. Messier 45 is the Pleiades open cluster, and we talked a little bit about that in the previous episode. But you know, one thing with the Pleiades is that there's that nebulosity, especially around the star Merope. Do you ever see any hints of that nebulosity that the Pleiades is meandering through in space?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because a lot of people report visually seeing nebulosity in M45, and because of the luminosity of like the 6 primary stars, what it sometimes is just dirty optics that people are, you know, mistaking for nebulosity. But in my 12-inch light bridge, I believe I did see some of it around Merope. Yeah, you know, I'd say that I saw it, but it was very faint. And you know what? I guess there's probably a possibility I didn't. Maybe it was a little bit of fog on the mirror.
Yeah, I guess that could be. So what's happening is that Messier 45 is an open cluster, and it's traveling through our Milky Way galaxy. And what's happened here, though, is a coincidence, and that's that it's passing through part of the, I think it's called the Taurus molecular cloud. And this is a large cloud of dust and gas that is in space, and then sort of the Pleiades has come along and is passing through it. Now, with a lot of sort of younger star clusters, such as the star cluster in the Orion Nebula or some of the stars in the Lagoon Nebula that we see in the summer, those stars are being birthed out of a nebula. And I think the story goes that it was originally thought that the nebulosity that the Pleiades has around it perhaps was left over from the creation of the Pleiades. But it turns out, at least from what I understand, that this is just simply a coincidence. Eh?
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
So back in the 1800s, an observer named E. Barnard was observing it visually with his 5-inch. He had a 5-inch refractor, and he actually noticed additional nebulosity that is surrounding the Pleiades. So there's kind of like that core nebulosity in by Merope and that, and really on a good evening, with decent seeing and a decent little refractor, even actually find like the nebulosity isn't too bad to see. It just takes like kind of going back to it year over year and kind of getting used to what it looks like. And the way that I tell the nebulosity around the Pleiades from the especially like in the Merope area, from perhaps like dirty optics or maybe dew or haze or whatever, is that it's not symmetrical, and the nebulosity that's nearest Merope is kind of like a bit of like a billowing cloud from a smokestack or a big fire in the distance, where it kind of is rising up, and then it has it kind of shifts, right? And so it's not perfectly circular around the stars. And then you can kind of go and take a look. Lots of other bright stars nearby, like in the Hyades, there's bright stars. There's not nebulosity around those. There's stars up in Auriga that don't have any nebulosity around them. You can kind of go back and forth and compare them. And if you're not seeing that similar pattern around those stars, well, then it's not the optics. It's something closer to that star. And so what's happening is the Pleiades is passing through part of this molecular cloud. It's lighting it up. The starlight is simply going out in space, just like waves being generated from a ship. And as those waves of light pass by and through that nebulosity, it's causing it to glow a little bit, and it glows faintly blue. Although I don't think I've ever seen the blue in that nebulosity, but there's a large section, and in a way, this stuff is a little bit easier to see than that nebulosity in around the Pleiades. But there's a large 3-degree section, which is just north of the Pleiades, called IC 353, and it's part of a huge reflection nebulosity that Barnard discovered in the late 1800s, and then he took a photo of it in 1896. I think I put 86 in my show notes here, but I know it was in 1896. And what it shows is at the center, it shows the Pleiades, and he's actually removed the nebulosity from the Pleiades surrounding the stars themselves, because it was so dark and there was so much nebulosity picked up that it just kind of obliterated the Pleiades. So he kind of superimposed another shot of the Pleiades without any nebulosity right in on top of the stars, like that, the brighter portion that we often see like in photographs. And then he overlaid that onto an image showing the fainter nebulosity that surrounds. Like there's a variety of other ones, but I think the easiest one to see is this IC 353 part, like I said, which is just north, and it's about 3 degrees across. So it's a really good target for people with, like we've had a lot of people writing us with these really nice, little affordable 60 and 70 millimeter f6 refractors. And even people with little ST80s, we call them the 80 millimeter f5s, are great little telescopes for trying to pick up this nebulosity. And because it's reflection nebulosity, you don't need any kind of fancy, filter or anything like that to see it. It's going to look best just by using the optics alone. So have you ever looked much at reflection nebulas, Shane?
Yeah, I have in the past. I kind of go through phases, where I'm looking at galaxies an awful lot or clusters an awful lot. And when I had my 12-inch light bridge, I did spend a lot of time on nebula.
Yeah, so these reflections are simply caused by the nearby stars. So unlike other nebulas like the Orion Nebula or the Lagoon Nebula, like I mentioned before, they're shining. They're actually giving off photons themselves as part of the star creation process. So in those instances, the nebula filters are going to work really well, like your oxygen 3 or your O3 or your UHC line band filters will work really well for picking them up. And of course, they look great in astrophotos, as does the Pleiades. And you can pick up these faint nebulas around the Pleiades if you're an experienced astrophotographer. But it's surprising that even just with a small telescope, like I said, a 2.5 or 3 inch telescope, you can actually start picking up some of these fainter ones. But you do need to be using that really low power eyepiece in the telescope in order to start picking them up. So it's just one of those things. So yeah, what are some of the observations, or would you like to observe the Messier 45 star cluster this winter, Shane?
I don't know if I understand that. What do I want to observe, or do I want to observe M45?
Yeah. Like, do you have any sort of observations you want to make of M45?
Nah, not really. I'll probably look at it because I enjoy looking at it. We discussed on the previous episode about doing a naked eye star count from a dark site. I would be open to that, but M45 is an object that I usually look at in the fall quite extensively, because as it's rising, it's a nice early evening object, and as such, I usually look at it a few times then, and then I'm good. Okay,
all right, yeah, sounds good. So kind of like this list of the stuff that I want to look at is taken from the list that I've been publishing in the RASC Observer's Handbook for about the past decade or so. So I'm kind of just sort of working from that. And this stuff is, maybe it's a little bit challenging or whatever, but I think it is kind of interesting. So a lot of these objects were discovered visually or early photographically, but they are within the grasp of amateurs. And one of the neat things about them is these are objects that a lot of people, if they're not as much into looking through the telescopes as they are and taking photographs of the telescopes, make some really interesting targets for people to work towards. So, for example, this nebulosity around the Pleiades that was discovered by Barnard in the late 1800s. Really makes a spectacular wide field image. And what you end up seeing if you take an image of it is you'll see not only the bright luminosity of the nebula that the stars are passing through, that the Pleiades are passing through in space, but what you'll also perhaps pick up is you can pick up some of the sooty clouds, sort of some of the dark nebulas that are part of the Taurus molecular cloud that are, I guess, too far away from the Pleiades star cluster to pick up any of the light, or the light just isn't passing through them for whatever reason. So you can kind of see this mix of beautiful bright star cluster and some of the faint sort of ethereal blue glowing clouds, as well as some of the dark clouds that are in the general area. So it's sort of it's a bit of a challenging thing to see, but I think for anybody to go out and take a look at the Pleiades is a really, really cool experience. And you can even see it, like even from the city here, I can see the Pleiades from my driveway. But in order to start seeing some of this stuff, you have to be somewhere fairly dark, or I do know that there is an individual even that just lives a few miles away from my house, closer to the downtown core, and he's taken some remarkable images of some of this faint nebulosity, even from a medium-sized city. So some of the other stuff that I have on this list, and some of the stuff that I kind of want to revisit, it's a little bit more challenged, comes from the Sharpless catalog. Do you ever look at any of the Sharpless objects?
Yeah, I've seen a few. I'd have to check my notes about which ones. I can't really. Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember which ones.
So one of the ones that I've run across, and I ran across this because there was these beautiful images taken about 12 or 13 years ago by I think it was Sean Walker and Dennis DeGico in Sky and Telescope magazine, and they took these beautiful images of the winter sky, like of Taurus, Eridanus. It had the whole like winter circle from Capella and Auriga and down through had lots of nebulosities through Gemini and Monoceros and Canis Major, and then back up through Orion. But what they were doing is taking a lot of shots in like hydrogen alpha and some of these different wavelengths of light. It's when these filters and the digital technology was first able to really capture some of those things. Do you ever see those images or similar images of like those wide field shots of the winter sky, and you can see like all those huge sort of wreaths of nebulosity? Do you ever see those?
Yeah, it's quite stunning, right? Because some of that nebula is, very challenging, or in some cases, not even possible visually. And when you see it on a photograph, it's astonishing because you're not used to seeing some well-known constellations like that. Orion might be a great example of, if you get a photograph of the entire constellation and you see all of the nebulosity within that constellation, it's quite remarkable.
Yeah. So when I got that magazine, I think I ended up buying 2 or 3 copies of it because I took one out and I trashed it like in the dew, and then I think I took one out and did the same thing, and then I bought another copy, and I actually cut out the article and put it in like an overlay, like plastic overlay material, so that it would be okay. I don't know where it is now, but what I was so excited about was that like using my 5-inch telescope, and I just bought my H beta O3 and UHC filters. I was really excited just sort of to pilot the ship kind of through those fields and to see what I'd be able to pick up. But like you were saying, like these huge clouds of dust and gas that are out there. And I think some of them, of course, some of them are like star forming regions. And then some of them are just glowing gas that's out in space, that's visible in these almost non-visual wavelengths. But as I found out, you can see some of them. So I think in total, there's something like 313 H2 regions that Stuart Sharp ended up cataloging down to a declination of negative 27 degrees north, and published his first catalog of 142 objects, or the SH1 or the Sharpless 1 objects, in 1953, and then had subsequently published additional catalogs in 59, and then I think eventually totaling like 313 of these objects, which include everything from planetary nebula to supernova remnants and other additional H2 regions. So Stuart Sharp was like tremendously accomplished astronomer, worked at all the major observatories from Flagstaff to Palomar to Yerkes. The list just goes on, and that's kind of carried forward this work throughout his career. And he only passed away. He was in his late 80s, passed away in 2013, I think it was. But it's really exciting to kind of try to sort of plow your telescopic ship through some of those uncharted waters, which typically a lot of these nebulae aren't even marked on many star atlases. Although one of the star atlases I use, which is the Ronald Stoyan's Interstellarium, actually contains many, not all, but many of these Sharpless objects are included in there. And sometimes they overlap. Like you were saying, in Orion, some of these Sharpless objects will overlap, like with the Orion Nebula, or some of the NGC objects, or the Caldwell objects, or whatever. And then there's some more recent catalogs, like the GUM survey. For example, like one of the famous GUM nebulas is the Vela supernova remnant. But anyway, if you want to see like a really good comprehensive usable, let's see, not atlas, I think that's the wrong word for it, but a catalog of the sharpless objects. Person by the name of Rainier Vogel, Vogel, has a PDF of the sharpless objects. Like, I know, like in the past, like having this list out there, and it's not like a list that people can go and get an observing certificate for, but it's a list that I just kind of created for fun on, what's possible to see from the darkest sites with small, really wide field telescopes. Because one of the things two things have become really common in the past couple decades, and that's inexpensive, really wide field telescopes, sometimes as supplemental to people's other equipment. And then in combination with going to dark sky sites, like Dave, who I mentioned earlier, he and I were chatting about observing and going to dark sky sites. So he goes to Cherry Springs, and we go down to the grasslands and go on other dark sky adventures. But we like the small telescopes for their portability, right? Mm-hmm. And being able to drag those off to all these sort of far and distant lands. But then what can you see when you get there? And you get there, and of course, if you kind of go and continue to look at those sort of same brighter objects, that's great, and they're going to look a lot better through your small telescope than maybe what a larger telescope is able to show you from home. But at the same time, these instruments sort of can open up a whole new world or a whole new universe. And then for those doing astrophotography, these can make some interesting targets. So one thing that I noticed was that Eridanus, and Eridanus is not a constellation, though you mentioned there was a couple galaxies maybe up there that you wanted to take a look at. I noticed that in Sean Walker and Dennis DeChico's images that there was this bright section in Eridanus that was probably about as faint as some of the more challenging things that I've been taking a look at previously. So I got my 5-inch refractor and got out to some really dark sites, and I was actually able to make an observation of this section called SH2-245, or I guess what's end up being called like the Eridanus arc, which is a long vertical arc. And I think it's sort of like the northern hemisphere equivalent of the Pencil Nebula in the Vela supernova remnant. But of course, I'm not sure if this is a supernova remnant or just a giant molecular cloud in Eridanus. But I don't know. I put an image there in the show notes, Shane. I'm not sure if you've ever observed this before, or if you've ever even noticed that in any of those images.
No, I don't think I've observed it. I don't recall trying for it. Excuse me. So yeah, I don't believe I've seen it.
Yeah, it's calling it the Eridanus arc is a little bit of a misnomer, because this bright section is actually it actually extends from Taurus into Eridanus. But I think mostly the section that I've been able to see is actually on the Taurus side. So kind of starts just in front of the Hyades, and then it arcs down into Taurus, then forms a loop, and then comes back up. But sort of one of those fainter things to see. So what were the galaxies that you wanted to look at in Eridanus, or do you have them handy there?
Yeah, one is NGC 1232. It is it's known as the Eye of God galaxy, I guess. And,
okay.
It's a magnitude 9.8. And it looks like it's about, I think, 6.5 arc seconds across. So it's a decent size.
Okay.
And at magnitude 9.8, it should be within the reach of my 4-inch. That's what Stephen was using, so it should be doable. I'm assuming a dark sky will be required. What else can I say? The interesting thing about galaxies, which we've talked about in the past, is just the ability to see them can be a bit misleading, because that magnitude is spread out sometimes over a larger space, and like M33, for example, is a fairly high magnitude, but it's so large, it's actually somewhat challenging to see, especially under a sky that's not very dark.
Yeah.
So the other one that I want to see in Eridanus is NGC 1291. This is the Snow Collar galaxy, I guess, and it's a magnitude 8.5, so it's a little brighter.
Yeah,
but it's larger than 1232. It's 9.5 arc seconds across. So It almost, like in images, 1232 looks like your standard sort of pinwheel galaxy with some arms. But 1291 almost looks like it looks more nebulous, like with a bright core. And then I don't know if it's some dust in the outer reaches, but it's a different looking galaxy, maybe a bar galaxy. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. How about getting over towards Orion? Is there anything in Orion that you might be looking to take a peek at?
Yeah, there's definitely a few things in Orion. There's a bunch of open clusters there that are kind of interesting. One is I guess 1981. NGC 1981.
That's right below the Orion Nebula, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. 3 prominent stars there, known as the Kolkar cluster. So that one has some interest. Oops, what the heck just happened here to my list? It looks like it reorganized it. I'm back.
Good.
And then there's the Running Man Nebula. I've tried for that in the past, and I think we've observed that one together, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that M43? Or part of M43 or something like that?
I don't know. It's NGC 1977.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it has an M like a Messier equivalent. I don't think so. I don't believe it does. Then there's a Rubber Stamp Nebula, NGC 1999, and then the Elusive Flame Nebula. That's always on the list. That one's quite challenging.
Yeah, I've seen. So that's the one besides Zeta, isn't it?
I think so. Yep.
Yeah, I've been able to see that in binoculars from just even a decent sight.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't find that one that one's not too bad to see. I don't think anyway. So yeah, that shouldn't be too bad. Have you not seen that one before?
I don't think I have. Yeah.
Yeah, like even a 7x50 will show that from a good site. It's kind of just being open to see it, right? Like a lot of the time can be just thinking that you're seeing a reflection in the binoculars or whatever. And like you need good quality, right? Like you need to have a good, clean optic that that has really good glass in it. But yeah, even a really good 7x50 will show that. Then of course, and that's on the eastern side of Zeta Orionis, which is the most eastern star or the far left star when you're looking at the belt. Like there's the 3 bright stars in the belt of Orion. That's the one that you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And then of course, just to the right or to the west and running south is IC 434, I think, which is the bright nebula that the Orion or the Horsehead is.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. Well, back in Orion, the one thing I want to take a look at is this huge nebula in the head of Orion, which I've seen before, but I wasn't able to get it in the fall when I was trying. And right at the head of Orion, but at the top of Orion, you have 2 bright stars, which are Betelgeuse and Bellatrix. They form the shoulders of Orion. But then there's the head of Orion, which is labeled as Lambda Orionis. And then that's actually an open cluster called Colander 69. And it's kind of a neat triangle of stars. And then there's like some other stars around it. But it's really nice in binoculars or whatever. But then sort of between almost extending it as far as Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, and you need about an 8 or 9 degree field of view to really begin to start to see the whole thing, is called the Angelfish Nebula. And there's sort of a brighter section that's about 4 degrees in height and about 3.5 degrees wide that forms like the front of that, which is just to the above and below and to the west or to the right of Colander 69. And that makes the sort of the head of the angelfish, which I've been able to see in my 5-inch before. But I was kind of hoping that if I can get to a dark enough sight with a little 50 millimeter and the huge field of view that has, I was kind of hoping that I might get enough contrast to be able to see the larger nebulosity. All right. So, anything else that sort of has caught your attention to be able to take a look at, Shane?
I mentioned too that there's a couple of open clusters in Monoceros that I would like to take a look at. Actually, there's three. NGC 2264, known as the Christmas tree cluster. There's and its overall magnitude is 4.1, quite a large object too, or spread out anyway. Then there's another one, NGC 2301, and then 2353. So a few open clusters to explore.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, there's some open clusters I'm going to take a look at as well that aren't not going to be as challenging as these sharpless objects. And but these ones are in the Colander catalog, which is a catalog of 471 open clusters by a Swedish astronomer Per Colander, published in 1931 on a paper called "On Structural Properties of Open Galactic Clusters and Their Spatial Distribution." And what's cool about all these is, and that's why I mentioned Vogel's site on the sharpless objects in his PDF, because somebody was asking me about these, and I mentioned that, there's these catalogs and whatever, and someone said, I'll have to save up to buy them. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. These are free. Like there's no book or anything or chart or anything that you have to buy. You can just download these papers for free. You just kind of go digging around a little bit. And you can just do a search for sharpless objects PDF or Colander objects, and you'll find people that have done all this amazing work that would be great published and in a hard book format that you could buy, but they've kind of freely put it out there. And of course, the original authors like Sharpless and Colander, their original papers are widely available. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool, popular catalog because many of the objects are really bright. And there's quite a few of them, like sort of the one of the popular ones is the Perseus, Alpha Persei moving group, which is one of the Colander objects as well. But some of the ones I'm going to take a look at are in the southern reaches of Canis Major, which really just culminates, around midnight on these nights that we're looking at, like Colander 121, which is just south of M41 in Canis Major. And then one of the really neat ones, I don't know if you ever looked at this one before, is called NGC 2362. That might be one of the hidden treasures in O'Meara's book. And it's right beside a star, which is beside another star. But anyway, you can see those in like a 15 power binocular, and that 2362 just looks spectacular. And then as well, there's a couple or a few open clusters in the Colander catalog, sort of that form like this meandering row from southern Canis Major into Puppis. And we can only just barely start to get some of the stuff in Puppis that's really interesting. But in the bottom of Canis Major, we have Colander 132, which is okay. But then we have Colander 140. And I'm particularly obsessed with Colander 140 because I think it was the cluster that Aristotle was observing when he wrote about seeing a cluster in Canis Major, because this actually corresponds more closely with his observation of what he saw and where it is. So he wrote about a hairy star, basically kind of looked like a comet in the tail of Canis Major. And when you look at Canis Major from a dark site at the same latitude that Aristotle would have been observing from, and I've gone and done this, you can actually see the whole of Canis Major from a really dark site, and there's nothing there that really looks like a comet except for Colander 140, which really, really does look like a comet. Like, although in the images you just see a couple stars and then sort of a trail of stars. Those two stars that are fairly bright end up just sort of merging together and forming a bit of a head. And then the trail of stars and some of the other stars around it blend together to form like a fuzzy chain. And from a good, really dark site like Aristotle would have had, and looking in that general area, it's pretty surprising how much Colander 140 does actually look like like a comet, and perhaps what Aristotle wrote about. Although I don't think it's it would be definitive to figure out what he was referring to exactly, because his notes are rather vague. I think that the best option is Colander 140 and not the Messier 41 as often as described. So I have a long story about that I'm not going to get into here, but the other two things I really want to see in that general area are Colander 135, which is in Puppis, and then I want to see if I can actually see NGC 2451, which I've seen from more southerly locations, but it culminates about 2 degrees above our true horizon here, so a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, that would be pretty tough. You'd want to go south, even if it's just a few hundred kilometers, and any little bit would help that.
Yeah, I've seen those before from southerly locations, so I've got sketches and everything of them. But it would just be fun to be able to get them if I can get out to a good spot here. One thing I haven't seen before, this one's sort of something I've tried for and failed to see, is the Seagull Nebula, which is just northeast of Sirius in Canis Major. Did you ever see this one?
No, I've never tried for it.
I feel like, and I've tried on a few occasions with a variety of instruments, and I've never been able to get it. I'm not sure why. I don't know whether it was just like the nights weren't good that I was going for it or what, but that's one of the objects I really want to really give a try for this late winter season anyway. Hopefully I'll be able to get it. So yeah, so that's kind of it for me and what I want to take a look at. Shane, do you have anything else to add to this set of objects that you want to take a look at in the late winter sky? I know some of this stuff is fairly challenging, but I think it kind of gives people, like, often we get questions about, like, what are we looking at? What are we trying to see? And, this is sort of some of the objects that we're going after these days.
Yeah, the Seagull Nebula, I think, would be fairly challenging. It's huge. Like, it's 120 arc minutes by 40 arc minutes. And over that size, or over that space, it's magnitude 10. So magnitude 10 in and of itself isn't super bright. And then when you spread, that luminosity over that, that area of sky, that would be challenging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be interesting. I like I said, I haven't been able to get it yet. We'll see.
yeah. There's kind of there's a couple interesting dark lanes, which that might provide enough of a sort of a contrast, where you could maybe see like some faint light, maybe just dropping off. And this is one of the ones too, like I guess it's it gets to maybe some of the philosophical, what is an observation? This is probably one that I would categorize more as detecting than observing, but I guess you never really know until you put telescopes on it and see what you can see.
Yeah, we'll see what I can see there. But I've tried everything on this one. My 5-inch, like different filters, H beta, 3 UHC. I've tried my 22 by 100 binoculars, my 10 by 70s, and I kind of think like it's one of those things that if I can get it on the right night, that's not too cold, that I'm not freezing, or the telescopes aren't frosting up, I might be able to get it. But yeah, I've been trying to get this one for, I don't know. I feel like it's got to be at least a decade. So
yeah.
Anyway, it's part of the fun.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Anything else to add to this episode?
No, that is everything.
All right. Well, thanks, Shane. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. And we really enjoy receiving your observing reports and maybe what you're interested in observing this late winter season to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.